Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Maria Nicanor. I'm the director here at the Cooper Hewitt, the Smithsonian Design Museum. For those of you who are less familiar with us, we're the National Museum of Design of the United States, and we do exhibitions and programs about all the design fields. We just opened 2 shows that actually look at the connections between design and other fields. Upstairs, we have a show about design and photography, and we're here tonight because of the installation that we just opened that explores the connections between design and sound and music. So to kick off that exhibition and Devon Turnbull's listening room, which we just opened last week, we wanted to do it with a very special conversation between 2 storytellers that tell their stories in different ways through design, but also through music. So I'm thrilled to have you here, Devon, and of course, John Schaefer. Thank you for joining us here tonight. I think you're all in for a treat. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Alexandra Hodkowski, our curator for public programs. But I hope you come back when we open Art of Noise, which is the exhibition that the listening room is connected to. It opens in February, and today will be just a taste of more programs like this and the full exhibition, which will come on next year. So thank you for being here.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to be brief, but as Maria mentioned, I'm the curator of public programs here. Thank you so much for coming and helping us activate Cooper Hewitt, this 123-year-old building with music, listening, and experimentation. We are sitting now in what was the music room for the original Andrew Carnegie Mansion. So we thought it was an appropriate place to start your experience here tonight for a very special conversation that Devon planted a seed with us about when he first started talking to us in the planning for the incredible installation HiFi Pursuit Listening Room Dream Number 3, which, as Maria mentioned, opened last Thursday. It was a dream of Devon's to involve renowned radio show host and author John Schaefer in the programming, and we're happy that sometimes we can make dreams come true. Both Devon and John craft audio experiences for audiences around the world. John uses his knack for sound storytelling and inquiry with musicians featured on his shows New Sounds, which he started in 1982, and Soundcheck since 2002. Devon, on the other hand, crafts the sonic experience through his designs, high-fidelity equipment, and a whole host of musical collaborators that all synchronize to create an impeccable, natural sound journey via his custom audio installations. We are thrilled to have you experience his Shrine to Music here tonight. After a brief conversation here, we'll head to the listening room, which is right around the corner. The room is in the former Carnegie Library, which is one of the first historic spaces Devon has worked with. It is intimate, small, and made for calming down and listening. And because of this, we're gonna be going into the room in groups designated by the color on your wristband, so that's why you all have a wristband. More on that when we transition. When you're not in the room, we have 2 of our other favorite things besides design available, drinking and shopping. So you can grab a drink. There's gonna be a bar just in our conservatory at the other end of the enfilade here. And definitely check out the amazing custom t-shirt, do a little plug here, which Devon and his team made just for the installation here. I have to do a few thanks. A whole host of people make these things happen. The exhibition is made possible by the August Heckshare Exhibition Fund, the Aaron Kranz Fund, the Barbara and Morton Mundell Design Gallery Endowment Fund, the Fisher Arts Impact Fund, and Jonathan Schroeder and Janet Borgerson. In-kind support has been provided by Kvadrat and USM Modular Furniture. We're just beginning to kick off the programming for the listening room. There's incredible people coming through, including Devon himself, on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays from 1 to 4. And otherwise, it's open through July with playlists with genres of jazz, classical, and ambient. Stay tuned for more upcoming programs and conversations on contemporary speaker design, how we experience music through graphic design, and a special hi-fi tour in Tribeca. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to our guests. Thank you so much and enjoy.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for coming. And huge thanks, John, for joining me here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm not sure who's supposed to be interviewing who here.
Exactly.
The best interviews are always a conversation.
Definitely.
But I do want to ask about a couple of words in the title of this exhibition. So, Hi-Fi Pursuit, Listening Room, Dream number 3. What was dream number 1? And how, if at all, has it changed from what we're going to see?
Okay, I'd like to start by setting this up way before Hi-Fi Pursuit. Hold on, let's see if I can say it. It's a little long-winded. Hi-Fi Pursuit, Listening Room, Dream number 1, which it was a dream that I never thought would really be realized. Crafting audio equipment, the audio craft, sort of artisanal boutique audio, handmade, everything from turntables to speakers has been my passion for as long as I can remember. But I really started this series of work in earnest over 20 years ago. I was living just a few blocks from here, and at the time, so I have a chapter of my background, which was when I was working in fashion and art. And in that time, I became really serious about listening, that listening was a central part of not just my creative process, but also just kind of my sort of, not to overdo it too much, but of my sort of spiritual life.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to create the idea of this like shrine to music where I would sit and listen. Like I said, I was living right by here. I would visit this museum regularly as a young designer and just thought this is such an incredible aspirational place for anyone to one day imagine their work. And but I had a day job at the time because my fashion career wasn't really paying all the bills. I had a day job working for MTV doing graphic design, which had nothing to do with anything I was interested in creatively. And I poured all of my creative energy into building myself this sound system from end to end, from the first transducer being the pickup to the last transducer being the speaker. So I would finish work and I would bolt out to Bushwick where I had a shared wood shop, and I'm just there all night long building these various works, and I would work late into the night, and I would go back into the city and listen to new sounds. So it gives you an idea of what my schedule was like.
Right.
And
11 p.m. to midnight, in case
11
you're wondering.
11 p.m. to midnight, Monday to Friday, correct?
All 7 nights.
All 7 nights.
Yeah. I'm not there.
Okay, but we're going to get into how that's even possible. But this vision that I had was very clear to me at the time, I saw making audio equipment as a form of high design and an artistry that I just felt was not recognized yet.
Yeah.
And I did this for about 10 years, and really no one cared. Like, I would tell people I'm obsessed with making audio equipment. I love design of audio equipment. I love wiring circuits and tuning speakers. And people just look at me like, okay, what else? What else can we talk about?
We all have our cross to bear,
But and listening to new sounds, I had this. There's this. I felt like there was this place on the air where there was music presented in such a unique way that was exactly the way I wanted to have music like presented to me. And I saw I had this sort of like vision for really everything that's happening right now, which is so surreal, where I could be making this equipment and pouring enough energy into it, and it would be recognized and justified somehow. And then I could create this new kind of environment for listening to music where the kind of music that you play can be appreciated properly, because there aren't that many places where you can get exposed to the kind of music you play or can properly appreciate it. So that's a long-winded just thank you for all this inspiration. And I think an interesting background on just some insight into why I feel like this moment is so surreal for me. Sitting here with you, having my work in this building, it's really kind of too good to be true. So thanks to the museum, thanks to you, John. And to get back to your question, Hi-Fi Pursuit Listening Room Dream number 1 was a work that I created in 2022. When I had been building these systems semi-professionally for probably 15 years by then. I had some work I was doing for people in the field, but always had other full-time work. Right around that time, things started really gaining some recognition, and I was invited by a guy named Alex Logsdale, who is the second-generation owner of Lisson Gallery, which is a blue-chip art gallery in Chelsea. He came to the U.S. to start the U.S. branches. His father started the gallery in the 60s, I believe, in the early 60s in London, and they've shown everyone, or they represent Ai Weiwei and Anish Kapoor and Marina Abramovich, and Alex's father, Nicholas, has all kinds of stories from when I was showing there about when Yoko Ono would do performances in the gallery and everything. He invited me to show my work, which I would have never really considered. I would have never really had the courage to call myself an artist at that point, because you can't self-certify yourself really as an artist when you're not a traditional artist.
Well, there's an interesting line between art and craft, and there is almost no craft that cannot be elevated to art.
Yeah.
You could be a bricklayer and become a great artist.
Indeed.
So that border is a very porous one. But I think you're right. It's not for the artist to say, I am an artist.
You can say it.
You can say it. Doesn't mean as much.
Doesn't mean as much, yes. As when you're invited to show on this level that honestly I never would have dreamt I would have an opportunity to show on. So I said, okay, well, if I'm going to do a show in an art gallery, I'm going to create a complete system and environment, not just bring in some other work of mine, kind of curate it in a way. I want to create a listening room as a complete artwork. So when I do these pieces, this being the third in this series of works, there's nothing in that work that existed before I started making that work. And so almost every circuit is fairly unique. And most of the stuff is kind of component to component wired. There aren't like circuit boards. It's not just like kind of piecing something together the way you would if you were putting together a sound system for a concert. You just sing 15 of these and 12 of these, and it's really like a very deep exploratory on how can I do things in a new way that push the boundaries of my work and create a total work that's fully realized in some way.
Yeah. It's interesting because we think of immersive sonic experiences. People use the word ambient a lot. And, Brian Eno, when he coined the term ambient music over 40 years ago, he said it must be as ignorable as it is interesting.
Furniture music.
Well, but it has to be more than that if you choose to listen into it, which gets me to the other word in the title that I found really interesting, which is pursuit, which is a very active word. And I love the idea of listening not as a passive reception of sound, but as an activity, as something that rewards you the more active you are in it. And
Absolutely.
that if you pursue that activity, you will get rewards that the casual listener or it's the difference between hearing and listening, I guess.
Yeah. And also in minimalist music, there's a lot of, not all music works in this format.
Yeah.
And a lot of people come to me wanting to, of course, everyone brings their own preferences to the experience and say, I would love to hear such and such. and I'm also not, I have no authority to tell people the right and wrong way to listen to what music. But it's easy to say, well, the music needs to have there needs to be a journey that you go on when you listen to the music. It needs to take you somewhere. If it's just, you know, I want to almost say, if there's just repetition, it doesn't, it would get boring after, a minute of 5 seconds playing over and over again. But in minimalist music, there's a lot of great music that you could probably say that about on the surface, but when you listen to it with enough intention, you realize there's a lot going on.
Absolutely. So, I think anybody who dared to play the early works of Steve Reich or Philip Glass on the radio had this experience, because this would have been back in the 70s before they were both, very well-established composers. You would get a phone call, or more than one phone call, from a listener saying, your record is stuck. The needle is stuck in the groove. And, of course, that was not the case at all. But for people who were doing other things and it was on in the background, an early Philip Glass work, 5 minutes in, might sound similar to what it was at the very beginning. If you actually went back to the beginning, you would see that, in fact, everything had changed.
Yeah.
But it happened so incrementally and so subtly and was handled with such composerly flair that, without waving a flag and saying, look what I'm doing, he did it. And it got done. And, the active listeners were the ones who trekked up the 6 floors of the loft to see him and his band in the early 70s.
You say anyone who was playing that music on the radio, and then you mentioned the 70s.
I'm using plural just barely there. There's not a whole lot of us doing that.
Yeah, so I would love to hear about the birth of new sounds. Where were you at the time? And I mean, talk about a vision. You've been doing this. What number are you on? And because every episode is numbered, which is one of the best parts about listening to the show. Like academically, it's so dense. There's so much incredible music there. And then John will say, this is episode number, and then what number are you on?
I'm almost embarrassed to say it's 5,089. 5089 is tonight's show. But
there's nothing embarrassing about that. It is one of the most incredible accomplishments.
But see, here's the thing. I didn't start numbering shows. I just, I would do a show and people would say, what did you play on Friday night? And I would look up my Friday night playlist. But then in 1984, NPR picked up the show once a week. And then in 86, they began taking 5 nights a week. And, not every station rushed to take new sounds. But the ones that did, some took 1 a week, some took, and people would say, what did you play Friday night? And I'd be like, I have no idea. I don't know what show you were listening to. So I started numbering them then. So there's like, I don't know, maybe over 1,000 unnumbered shows as well. So the numbers really are, at this point, it's just, I'll tell you what it is. Our online archives are so dense that it can be hard to find a show, and I want people to be able to find them. So you don't even have to go to our website. You just open up a browser, you type in new sounds in the program number, and it takes you straight to the show.
I mean, these things will live on for an unimaginably long time.
Or until the electricity runs out.
And those numbers will, those numbers will be like chapters in an epic book, journal, novel.
Well, it is a story.
Yeah.
I mean, radio is a storytelling medium. And if you're, if you're all New Yorkers, you probably know WINS, 1010 wins. You give us 20 minutes, we'll give you the world. That's their story. You're busy. You don't have a whole lot of time for all this stuff. Just stay with us for a couple of minutes. We'll give you what you need to know. You go on your way. All Things Considered, on the other hand, is telling you a very different story. They're saying, you really need to look beyond the headlines, and here's what's really going on. Oldies stations, you are right. they don't make songs as good as they used to. Or top 40 stations. You don't want to be uncool. You need, I mean, every radio station is telling you a story, whether they can condense it into a pithy phrase like 1010 wins or not. And, you know, the New Sound story, I mean, I didn't intend it this way, but it has been a story about being an active listener, about just being open-minded. And, you know, the first time I heard overtone chanting, it's like, if you don't know what to listen for, you may not hear it. You know, you just hear somebody going, but you're not hearing the high whistling tone that's happening above, you know, and that happened early on. I was like, oh. So, you know, it's a story that I almost feel like I haven't been telling it. I've been finding it. I've been discovering it along with people who listen.
So that's another thing I wanted to ask you about is like, how do you discover music? Because I pretty much discover music through you.
Well, you know, that's the thing. With everything available to us digitally,
Now,
it's like, where do you start? It's more important. The whole thing was it's going to democratize everything. You know, there'll be no more gatekeepers. If there are no gatekeepers, you're at sea. You have no idea where to start. So gatekeepers become even more important. You know, I think we all have like that film critic who seems to be on the same wavelength as us. And if she doesn't like it, I probably won't like it. And if he likes it, I probably won't like it. You know, and for me, New Sounds was, you know, kind of a way to try and make sense of a huge body of music that was simply not being played on the air. I started the show out of my own record collection. I mean, I was writing letters, sending them off to anybody who made any kind of odd music, and just saying, "Send me what you got." And I listened to a lot of stuff that did not make it onto the air. But you know, now you know, people say, "How do you keep up?" And I just have to honestly say, I don't. I can't. No one can. I'm just trying to keep my head above water. But you do develop a kind of a sixth sense.
of course.
And it's like, I get like 300 emails a day pitching different artists and stuff. And if I just spend 1 minute, not answering, just opening and reading each, that's 6 hours of my day gone. And I've done nothing except read emails. So, yeah, you know, I'll take a flyer on something and oh man, I'll think, good on me, my instincts were right. And then I'll think, what about the other 9 of those 10 emails that I didn't open? How much more good stuff am I missing? So it's the great frustration of the job, is that there is simply no way to keep up.
Yeah, I mean, your recall for the music also seems to be, I mean, you clearly live and breathe all that music. How do you, what is your primary way of listening to music? Like you know, I guess of course the nerd in me wants to ask like what kind of equipment you're listening to it on and stuff like that. And how has that evolved over, you know, the 40 years you've been doing the show?
My home equipment has devolved from a sound system in college that I was very proud. I spent every penny I had to try the baby Advent speakers that, you know, that were the best bargain for, you know, the smallest space and the big sound, and monster cables, because as everybody knows, the weak link is always the cabling. You make your own cables, I presume.
Yes, we make our own cables.
Yeah.
Make our own wire when we can.
Uh-huh. So, now I have an Alexa in my kitchen, and it's like, Alexa, play songs by Nick Cave. I mean, I have to say, in all seriousness, I am immersed in music every day, and sometimes when I get home at night, I just need to like
Me too.
put the TV on and watch
Yeah.
a soccer game or something.
Me too. Yeah. Sometimes people will be hounding me on like, they have some piece of gear they sent me and it just arrived at my house like 4 hours ago, and they're like, "Did you listen to it yet?"
Right,
And I'll be
right.
like, "I was listening to stuff like all day long, and I did not connect this thing in the 20 minutes since I've been home," because you need rest
Right,
also, because
and-
active listening requires energy.
Right. And oral AU or oral fatigue is
Absolutely.
a real
It
thing.
really is.
You probably heard about the loudness wars back in the aughts and the teens.
Sure,
where,
yeah.
So if you put music up on a screen, you look at the wave file, you should see peaks and valleys. It should look like this.
Dynamics.
Right. But on the radio, that is hard to broadcast. It's much easier if you compress everything down. And so in the aughts and into the teens, record producers started compressing everything. And if you put that waveform up on a screen, it was just like a
It's a
solid
rectangle,
block.
solid block. I mean, now more than ever, I mean, you look at music on a waveform and it's just a solid, thick line.
Yeah. And that is fatiguing. You know, you listen to a whole album of that, and whether you realize it or not, your ears are tired because they're just being bombarded in the middle of your hearing spectrum. There's nothing up here, there's nothing down there. And, you know, as I say, broadcasters want that compressed sound because the compressed sound is thick.
But yeah, it also helps when you're in a car.
Right.
And, your car maybe is 70 dB ambient, just road noise driving down the road.
right.
And when you have a very dynamic recording, there's a lot of stuff at 55, 60 dB that's really important. And we go for that when we're trying to create high fidelity, realistic sounding reproduction, because the plucking of the string and then the decay of the note is what makes the thing sound real. When you compress it and the attack and the sustain just goes like this, it doesn't sound real. And that's on a macro scale, but then on a more micro scale, you realize that it's just these little things that, it's like with visual, if you had that kind of dynamic compression, there would be no lights and no darks. It would just be all like gray.
Gray, yeah. So, yeah, and the corollary of that is that extreme dynamics require that you be in a place where you can actually hear the highs and the lows, There's an awful lot of sound above even 20,000 hertz, which is absolute kind of, most of us can't even hear that high. But there's a lot of stuff up there, overtones of overtones.
And below 20 hertz.
And they mean something to us. We don't hear them with our ear, but we feel them with our inner ear. And to lose that stuff is literally disorienting because your brain uses sound as a cue of where you are in a room, which is why sound and space, people have been making music to certain spaces for as long as we've lived, since we moved out of trees and into caves. Which is why, another thing that I find so interesting about your project, because every space is going to require a bespoke set.
Absolutely, yeah.
You would not play, you wouldn't play certain pieces in a very reverberant place. For 20 some odd years, I did a live concert series at Brookfield Place, the old World Financial Center, right across the street from the World Trade Center. And if you've ever been there, it's like this huge cathedral of steel and glass. It is so reverberant. And I very quickly learned that it's a great place to program voices,
Chamber music.
choral music, ambient electronic music. There was this Roma gypsy brass band from Macedonia called Kochani Orkestar. I love this band, but their music is like, it's all in nines and sevens, and it's just, and they had never played a gig in North America. And finally, like 10 years in, I was like, damn it, I know it's going to sound like soup, but I'm booking these people. And sure enough, they started playing, and it was just like, whoosh. But I have a good crew, and they tight-mic'd everything. Of course, they're wandering around the stage as they're playing. Did an hour and a half, and I got maybe 20 minutes that was broadcastable, but that 20 minutes was worth every second.
Awesome.
But just to say that, space and sound are inextricably linked, whether on an intuitive level, the way Gregorian chant started, the way most of the world's sacred traditions started, or, on a more intentional level as you do.
Mhm.
So how are we doing for time? All
It's
right.
done.
Enough talk.
So Devon,
Less
Devon.
talk, more rock.